So how to conduct primary marketing research, another Grow Weekly session. So what is marketing research? Marketing research is systematically about collecting and recording and analyzing qualitative and quantitative data about marketing goods and services concerns. The purpose is to discover and analyze how changing marketing mix elements affect customer behavior. This is pulled from a resource there, research versus market research versus marketing research. So really the difference that this is a systematic approach to it. So remember that, because it's actually a process that we have to put together, and it is about collecting that information and really to give us insights so we can sell our products and services, right? Like, it's fundamentally about collecting information about our audience, but also how is our marketing doing? Like, actually doing an audit. Are what we're doing and our efforts actually contributing to connecting and inspiring and serving our brand and our customers? So this is where we talked about in market research. If you haven't seen it, it is available in the Grow member portal, and it's the market research. And market research, it's the 4 Ps, right? Product, price, place, and promotion. We don't have promotion as far as market. Market research is about understanding the environment, the economical situation that will influence how you sell your business. So that's the kind of understanding competitors and what they're doing and what are the trends and things like that. So really understanding that environment. Marketing research is that, but so much more. It's that extra layer of understanding how your efforts are doing. How are you promoting it? How well you're doing it? What is the messaging? Ways you're doing it and connecting to it. So it's that next level. So you have to do your market research. And now it's like, how well are we doing? So that is the promotion piece. So when do we use it? All the time. Market research for sure is done at the beginning or the change of any business. If you're just expanding your business or going into a new market, you're going to do your research. But marketing is that systematic approach, but it's done all the time. It just depends how you're going to do it. So marketing research covers that conception, that early stage, as you develop, as you're figuring out where it's being placed, and the evolution you have to, as you change your product and service, you're going to constantly be doing that. It's growing audience and it's branding. So your audience is constantly changing. Your branding, are you staying on brand? Are you doing what you need to do? From all the way from that brand awareness, all the way down to conversion, and then for sure that loyalty piece. So ultimately, we want to make sure our brand is strong, it's communicated effectively, and we really do increase that brand equity, right? That value of our brand. So marketing research informs all of those decisions that you do as a business when it comes to marketing. So a really important thing to do all the time. So why you need it? Well, because to stay ahead of the competition and to be really strategic and fast and respond in today's day and age where everything is changing, you need to be informed. And in the spirit of Emily and encouraging me to do gifts, very much like Bart Simpson here, when he's smart and he can do it and you can go and change to your different audiences, that's what marketing research is going to give to you. It's going to help you define your ideal client. It's going to figure out what channels you need to use, when to promote things, how to promote things, know what kind of content you're going to create. And it's also going to help you enable sales. And you're going to you see that a lot in the big corporate world, right? Oh, I'm in sales enablement, and that's in the marketing team. Well, that really means it's like marketing always supports sales. Whether you're a team of one and you're wearing many hats, marketing goals and what you do actually supports your sales efforts, right? And then must be aligned with your business goals and objectives. So that data that you're collecting from a marketing standpoint is going to inform your sales channels, materials, all of that. There. and to understand how the competition is going to. So it's also going to understand different challenges within your customer journey. So this is where, okay, so we have a lot of people, they're coming to our website, but they're not coming through and they're not converting. Why is that happening? So that kind of those challenges, marketing research, you can go, I'm going to dive in. I have to learn more. That's all research is just learning more, collecting the information and synthesizing it. It's also an opportunity to check your messaging and messaging verbal, as well as some of your going back to the content. Are your images resonating? Are you staying on brand? Your voice, your style, all of that is all part of marketing research and why we do it. So a lot of reasons, and it doesn't mean you're going to be doing that all of the time. So we're going to get into the whole goals piece in a second. So we talked about this in market research. It's the same marketing research, primary versus secondary. Primary is that firsthand raw information, direct access to the subject. That's primary. That's what we're talking about today. Secondary, we're going to take care of that on the other end, and just as important, and it supports it, but primary is that firsthand, right? We're going to interview, one-on-one conversations, we have focus groups, we have surveys / questionnaires. Sometimes there's an observation, and then we also get feedback. So today we're going to dive into that a little bit deeper. But before we do that, really that value, that primary research, what is it and why would you want to do it? So it gives you qualitative mostly, doesn't mean you can't do quantitative. So the difference between qualitative is that those big open-ended sessions, right? Where you can actually talk to someone, you can see their responses, you really get a feeling, emotions when they talk. It's really rich, which is not easy to do in a survey, but a quantitative is a survey, but really that rich qualitative stuff. Quantitative is definitely a piece, but when it comes to secondary research, you can get some quantitative information, but you never get that qualitative stuff. So primary is really focused. That's the value on that. You do have control over the data, right? It's primary. It's firsthand. You're talking to that person. There's nothing in between. You don't have to go, how is that research done? Did the person understand the questions? All of those kinds of things. We have it, we own it too, and we had control over creating it. Firsthand information, it's right away, right? It's right there. There's nothing in between. Helps to solve a problem. That's typically how we do it and why we do it. Data accuracy. Now that's if you're doing it properly, but you can verify. You can say that what I did, it's accurate because I can do it. It's you doing it. It's verified and it's accurate, and it is the most recent, right? Quite often secondary research could be done 2 years ago. Well, how has things changed? Right now, right here, this research is being done and it's quite recent. So that's the value in primary. So before we even get started into interviews and focus groups and things like that, we have to sit back and go, okay, so why are we doing this, right? What is the outcome that we want to get from this? If it's because you're not sure that, like we mentioned at the top, why people aren't converting. Clearly, they're not converting on the website. We need to figure out why. And so make sure you actually say that, because if not, you're not going to know what questions to ask. You're not going to know what tactics to use, what type of research. So make sure you're clear on those goals, why you're doing it. Is it for exploratory, which is quite often just a broad information? I'm not sure if I should be selling this product, which is market research, or if my customers are really happy with this service, should I keep this on as a service? Like, that's very specific. Exploratory is like, I'm just curious about these. Very broad, right? So two very different things that you need to think about before you enter into this. Qualitative or quantitative, we talked about that, the differences between the two. Do you know who you need to research? Really figure out that person before you do it, or else the information isn't going to come from it. It needs to be standardized in some way. Make sure you have the skills to conduct the research. Interviewing and time, I'm going to jump into that too, because skills and time, it takes a long time to do interviews. And then even the survey, do you know what kind of questions you're going to be asking? Do you know how to formulate it? Do you know how to set up the if then that? Like, do I need to do screening? There is a bit of skills allowed for it, and timing definitely, it takes a bit. Doesn't mean all of them take a bit. Quick feedback surveys, like at the end, I'm going to show you a quick one. And I'll tell you how quick it is too, but to actually conduct interviews in a systematic kind of way, if you need to conduct 20 interviews, it's quite a bit of time. So anyway, getting into then, you have to think about budget, incentives, and tools. Do you have to pay someone to come and do the interviews? Do you have to pay a facilitator to do a focus group? Do you have to give incentives for people to come and interview? Are you going to give an incentive for people to come to the focus group? Do you have to pay for the location of a focus group? Do you have to have other tools? Like, there's a lot of considerations there. Do you have access to these people? Biases, just always make sure you take into consideration when you're asking the questions, make sure you don't lead them, because you have an idea of what you want them to say, especially when it's our business, right? It's a very personal thing. That's the other reason why you might have someone else do it, because then they can be more objective. So just be really careful when you're asking the questions, you don't have those biases, and when you're synthesizing the information. Make sure your sample size is large enough that you're getting enough information to go ask 2 or 3 of your clients how you're doing. Is that going to be enough? Maybe. But if you asked 50 clients, the more likely that sample size is much bigger, you're going to get a better idea. And then when you do collect the data, make sure that you consider privacy, right? If you're going to record it, make sure you ask permission, make sure you inform them how you're going to use their information. And when you store it, make sure you've considered all of that security, right? You don't want to leak out any personal information. So data collection is something that it has to be considered. And then similar to the market research, we still need a plan, right? Figure out why you're doing this, what you want to achieve, who's your audience, the timeline, how are you going to approach this, what kind of tactics you're going to use. Maybe it's a combination of interviews, focus group, and survey. And then how are you going to report it, next steps. Now, in reality, we're a small business owner. I'm not doing some crazy research project. But what happens is, if you have a plan, you'll be able to systematically approach this. So maybe you're doing, it's like, okay, I'm going to do once a year, or I'm expanding and I need to do interviews and survey. But as an ongoing, and this is my goals for this, as an ongoing, I'm going to make sure I collect feedback on my website. Like, that's ideal. Just put a little plan together and make sure it's reasonable. And then you can start to collect the information so you can get the results that you need, and you can constantly be tracking it. So it doesn't have to be big. It just has to follow all of these steps. So let's jump into a few types just to expand upon them. So interviews are that face-to-face discussion, and having done a few over the years, it does definitely take time. I have done mostly virtual. And so in-person and virtual is, basically the same, but you have to consider things quite differently. Virtual does allow you to do recordings much easier than if you're going to record in person. It's just a whole different setup. But basically, interviews are the most useful, where a large amount of information is needed to be collected from a small sample of subjects. So interviews are often used to obtain information from an expert about a specialist topic. And so those considerations will be consistent. You have to understand the why, define the research audience, and figure out what tools and budgets you need, in person, virtual. So the process really is to create that list of questions, qualitative and quantitative. You can put them both together. And typically it's in an interview, it's more qualitative. Does not mean you can't add a question for everyone consistently, to say, what is the What is the ability, uh, how likely are you going to use this tool if this happens? From 1 to 5, 5 with being more likely. And so even if you're interviewing them, you could ask that kind of question, even though you would typically see that on a survey, and they could say 5. Okay, thank you. Now you see some of this very similar style when you're interviewing to hire someone, right? Like it's still a set of questions. It just has a different purpose. So you have to figure out who's going to be doing the interview, how will you conduct the interviews, how will you schedule those interviews? Like how are you going to actually stay organized? Because that can be quite a challenge. How will you gather the notes? Are you going to be visually recording it? Are you going to have a recording down, like an audio recording? Or are you going to have someone transcribe it? And then how are you going to synthesize and report on that? So very consistent across actually a lot of the tactics. And those tools, just to throw a few out there, is the collaboration tools. When you're thinking about doing questions, use Miro. I love Miro for that. It's like, and then you can get input from the rest of your team. When you're scheduling, Calendly often works well. You can block out sections that are just for the interview, or you can use Doodle. Location, it's the typical Zoom, Google, MS Teams. One thing that I have recently come across, if you decide whatever you decide on doing, make sure you ask ahead of time from your interviewees if it's okay to record, but if this platform is okay. So recently, I was interviewing someone and using Google Meets, and they were not able to, within their industry, within their company, to be able to have recording on Google Meets. And it was like, wow, I never thought to ask that. So make sure you think about all the tools and the access to these tools for the people that you're interviewing. Location in person, make sure you book that if you have to have it. If note taking, again, we talked about recording and transcribing, so many cool tools out there. One to do transcriptions for Zoom, right? When we do recordings, when we export it, it goes into a video, it goes into transcription, and then there's an audio file and it gets exported right away. I mean, there's such an advancement now with all the technology. Synthesizing the information, condense.io I've used recently. Very cool. Oh my goodness. I have to actually figure out the pricing for it. There is a price attached to it, but basically you can upload the video. It transcribes everything and you can tag things. So you can synthesize it. So you can actually start to track different words, different feelings, and then it pulls it together into this really cool report. So if you're really serious about research, check out condense.io when it comes to interviewing. Surveys. If there's any questions, Emily, I'll leave you to bring them forward because I'm not watching my chat. So surveys, quite cool. During COVID, I think there were so many surveys that were put out. We were a bit in survey overload. So do consider that when you are throwing out surveys. One of some of the best practices is to keep your questions quite short, right? But let's get into what they are. So surveys are a set of predefined questions that you can send out to have people answer on their own. There's no guidance and no interaction with you. They can get a limited amount. You can get a limited amount of information from a large audience. The selection process is available using tools to allow for targeted audiences, right? Like that's why you can send out through MailChimp or SurveyMonkey to a broad audience, get a whole, and then get a few questions, but to a larger audience. So quantitative and qualitative, you'll see the very, select 1 or 2 items, but also leave a comment, which can be more qualitative. So that's the kind of information that you can gather with surveys. Typically less time consuming than interviews. And depending how you do it, it can be less costly or more costly. It's actually can be quite the same. It just depends on how you run them. So same considerations, the why, define your research audience and know what tools and budgets you want to do. First thing, you still have to create that list of questions, right? And how are you going to get your recipients? Are they part of your customer base? Are they part of maybe a chamber of commerce type of idea, and you have the ability to ask questions? I'm not sure if you can do that, but some type of organization. Or are you going to actually go through a research company and get who has a whole bunch of audiences that you can define and say, I need this survey, I'm going to pay you to do it. So that is how you potentially can get recipients. How will you send them the information? Is it you that's going to be sending it? Is it someone else that's going to be sending it? What are the tools? What's the channels? Who and how will you create the survey, right? So is there going to be screening questions at the beginning? If they answer this question, IFTT, is that if then that? I don't even know if I did that acronym right, but basically if you are from the age of 15 to 30 or 31 to 50, if you answer the older group, then it takes you in, and that's because that's a screening, and it's going to take you through a series of questions. If it's younger, you're going to go, thank you, maybe another time, or maybe you set them on a whole other different question route. It's pretty cool when you can actually get into these surveys. Quite often you do have to pay a little extra if you start to get into these very these deeper sort of intertwined kind of processes, but really cool. So SurveyMonkey is one, MailChimp does them. There's a bunch of them that are actually out there, but really think through, and that's where the brainstorming using Miro, where you can actually start and you can watch the path. It's a really cool process to do that. Make sure you figure out if it's branded, the language, the permissions, everything's in there in the survey, that you let them know ahead of time, because you can't talk to them. So it has to all be written in. And how will you gather that final information? What does that report look like? If you're choosing a tool, find out what that report's going to look like before you actually select it. And those tools, as I mentioned, the Miro is really cool. Research recipients like Ipsos is one. Again, there's a ton of them out there. SurveyMonkey, MailChimp, and synthesizing the information in the surveys. I did put condensed down there. I'm not sure if you can do that for surveys. I will have to check. And then focus groups. These are those small groups, right? We can get multiple people. Very interesting. Takes a little bit more to facilitate them. You can do them online, in person, but they have a real purpose. So focus groups allow the opportunity to get insights from a small group of your audience. The feedback is mostly qualitative and helps to get insights to the user's preferences, understanding of a product messaging, identify pain points, and test solutions. Rarely can you get quantitative stuff. It's really the richness of how they interact with your product, quite often in a product launch, or to test a campaign, to test branding. You want to get feedback from the group, and they can start interacting between each other, right? So you can actually see it. And then you can add in that observance too. If it's a focus group, how are they actually doing it? So there's a few different layers. It's kind of like an interview, observing. It's pretty cool. Just understand that people are reacting within the context of all these other people. It's really interesting. It takes a little bit to facilitate that. Same considerations. The process, you still have to think of those questions, right? And who's going to be there? Where are you going to do this? Who's going to actually facilitate the discussion? You don't want to be a part of it quite often, because you will, if it's you, remember those biases, right? So if it's your customers and you're running it, they don't want to say things that are going to upset you if they like you. So having some third party come in and to be a little more objective gets you some more truthful, more less biased, obviously, results. And that's really what you want. Sometimes it's hard to take all of this research. Going back to some of the answers, it's like, I think we don't do it quite often because we're afraid of the responses. But feedback that's constructive, where we can pivot it and really support, if we want to serve our customers and we want to support our audience, we have to be okay with all feedback, and take it and do something with it to make ourselves better. But it is hard. And in a focus group, I encourage you to not run them yourself if it's if it's your client base, just from objectivity standpoint. And then how will you get and gather and synthesize that final information? So collaborative tools, the same. Miro, it's quite often your own list of people, right? If it's a customer base or people you know, location, virtual and in person. Virtual actually works pretty cool. It's an interesting experience, but it's definitely different. And then figure out how to synthesize that information is probably going to be done in a very manual way. So primary research, these are the others, right? Those observations is about watching a person using a product or interacting with your service. This can be in person or virtual. So virtual, we talked about the website, right? How are people interacting with it? Well, heat mapping is going to tell you immediate, recent results, right? So it still is primary in the fact that it's being done right now. It's being done by you. There's no research done by a group of people saying this type of website is going to get this kind of information, right? Like that's very secondary. Primary, this is yours. You're getting immediate results. So that can tell you where people are going on the website and how they're moving through. It's that full heat map. Hotjar is a tool that can be used. Journaling is if you task someone to go through, maybe you've just done your website, or you're launching a new product, and you can actually get people to tell you their experience and they will journal it for you. So you're not observing it, but they will give you that firsthand experience for them. And then feedback is that voice of the customer right away, immediately. Chatbots can pop up, a quick survey. We're going to do a feedback one very shortly. And that's the voice of the customer. And that is immediate. How did you like this right now, actually doing this? One question typically is used, but you can have multiple questions. And then finally, marketing performance audit. Don't forget about this. How are your channels doing and your materials performing? When you evaluate your own marketing efforts, that is still primary research. And what types of things do we want to know about this? Are we reaching our customers with the information they need when they need it? Are our messages clear and consistent? Do they support our brand message? Do we know what past communications have been successful? Are we staying current with communication demands of our audiences? What marketing opportunities are we missing? And will our current plans support our future growth? So those are all those guiding questions, how we actually move about doing it. There's, you can go through all your data. You can ask people feedback. Like this isn't the tactics. This is sort of a group, and then you can choose the tactics. So am I going to do some feedback? Am I going to actually interview some people? All of these types of things, but it's really around performance. So don't forget to measure that as well. And here's a whole list of tools. Some of these were in our market research, and then I added in a few. There is one link at the bottom under userinterviews.com, and it's the UX research field guide chapter. Oh my goodness, there's so many tools there. It's really cool. And then there's an extra one underneath. It's still basically the same one. So that is a really neat one to find a whole bunch of different tools if you're missing it. ChatGPT interview reporting is condensed. Where can you get to participants for your interviews? That's a new one. Get.respondent.io is a really cool one I just found. I haven't used it, but a really neat one. So I'll leave that with you guys. Questions or comments before I take you into a really cool exercise?
We do have a couple questions.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you guys.
To have a consistent data from interview, what is the minimum sample?
Yeah. I don't think there is more than one, really more than two. It's there. I haven't learned if someone else knows that, but there isn't a perfect size. You just need to have something that is consistent. Like, for instance, you could still go out and, interview. So if you're talking to one of your customers and you're just getting feedback and we've done this. It's like that person engaged in a particular service. We wanted their feedback. We asked one person. It's still feedback. It's still information. If you're doing a large project, the more people you can get, the better. So one is still okay, but you definitely want to have a few. Some say the nice round number, from my understanding, is like, actually, I can't even put that out there. You just want a good size. And I've done multiple sizes for different things. So one interview is good. Just understand it's one. 5 is going to be better. 10 is going to be better. But you also have to think of your time and budget too, right?
So I guess the same would also be like for surveys too, right? So like the minimum sample for survey.
Yeah, surveys. So qualitative is less. You don't need, it's a smaller group of people, right? So to get 5 people that you're interviewing is amazing. You are right there. It's quality. It's rich. You can see their responses. It's very targeted. It is meant to be smaller. Surveys, you survey 5 people. Really, you want more, and you have the ability to get more easily through surveys. So cast out a wider net. Plus, because you don't have the ability to sort of control the questions and guide them through it, to really make sure that they understand the question. Like, how many surveys have you guys done, right? Where you go, what are they really asking? If I could answer this, but I could not, I could answer it a different way. I have no one to ask. So you want to cast a much wider net so that you can see some consistencies in questions. You can even see if there is inconsistencies, maybe you didn't word it properly. So you definitely want a much wider net. The interview process, you have the ability, like you put all your questions down, but you never ask them. I mean, you just don't ask them sort of like 1 question, 2 questions, 3 questions. Like, typically you don't, right? You might have to expand on something. You might have to use a different word for someone else or different style. So you have the ability to direct it. It's a smaller sample size. Surveys, you don't. Definitely cast out a much wider net.
Well, that's very, very good. Any more insights about like UX research?
So that link, I'm gonna have to find that link and I'll drop it in the chat for you guys. It has so much on that piece. If you guys, I am not a UX expert by any stretch of the means. I have worked with a UX designer in the past. She's amazing, and have gleaned a lot of insights from her. If that is something that is of interest for a future discussion, to get back into that UX piece, we might be able to get her to come in as a guest speaker. There's a lot of best practices that we follow from a UX standpoint when we're designing our website, right? Like, so you just want to follow those UX best practices. When it comes to UX research, I've read up about it. I've learned about how to do it. It follows very similar styling that we just talked about, because it really is the user experience. So it speaks more to when you're interviewing, it's the experience using something, right? So it's typically an experience using a product or one of your channels. So very specific research. So you'll take the same type of tactics, but it's focused in on that user. So they do a lot of observation and then a lot of journaling, a lot of heat mapping and things like that. The research we're talking about can be so much broader. So that would fall under, how we talked about the marketing, auditing your marketing performance. That kind of is in a big bucket. You can audit for user experience particularly too. So gets into quite specifics. So other than that, I would just do my recommendation as just an average person, like all of us should understand a bit about how the user experiences it. There are places to learn. Follow that link and I will share it, as well as LinkedIn has some really cool, simple, quick courses on marketing research, as well as the UX piece. So LinkedIn Learning, if you're part of Mississauga, if you're through the library, lynda.com. I think some other libraries have that too, and you get all of those free. There is, Emily, I think, what are the other courses that you use for learning? Skillshare, I think they might have something. I don't know if you've seen any.
Skillshare probably is like the best. Envato has some courses. Adobe also has some like online learning, depending on like what program it's kind of like related to. But I think Skillshare would probably be one of the better ones. It's definitely more casual. LinkedIn is a little bit more like serious up there, corporate.
Well, and I know LinkedIn because I've done their UX research. So I know LinkedIn has it. Udemy might have some stuff too. And I think there's a masterclass. If you've ever done masterclass, they're pretty cool. So I would just go and learn some basics when it comes to just know when someone designs your website, like Emily has a background in UX. If you want to do some of your own and it's around, say, your website, to be able to add in something like Hotjar, there is a cost to it, but you can do it. So you can actually start to watch. I can't remember what the other one is, but you can actually start to watch where they're interacting with your website. It's really cool. The challenge is what do we do with that? So we can do all of this research, but if we get this data, what does it actually mean? Right? And this is the big challenge. We go, wow, now I have to actually understand what they're saying and apply it to my work. So if someone, for instance, is going onto your website and they're getting stuck up here in this one spot, like maybe it's not converting and it's getting stuck up here. Like, what does that mean? Does that mean I have to change my call to action button? Does that mean they don't like this? Are they not getting the right information? It is just the data. You have to be the expert to figure out what to do, which is quite often why you would hire maybe a UX designer or someone who understands that to come in, or a website designer going, okay, that makes sense. So now we have to test this. So it is about experimenting. So even when you get this research information, you don't 100% have that, even if it's feedback for your service. Is it biased? Did you collect it in the right information? But it's information, you try something new, you test it again, did it work? And it's all about constantly information in, figuring out what it is, change one thing, don't change everything, change one thing, and then put it out for feedback again. And it's this research loop. That's really ultimately what we want to do, which is why one big research project and then nothing is never good. Or it's not never good, but it's very limited in its effectiveness. So it's like research, synthesize it, make the change, research again, and just keep that feedback loop happening.
Awesome. We do have another one. Okay, a second. When you mentioned messaging is part of our brand, how much do you think affects a service-based brand like mine, Immigration Services, when we decide not to use WhatsApp or direct messaging on social media to provide details or answers to questions about our services and process? Our reasoning being confidentiality, professionalism, not a reliable source of keeping a record. It wastes a lot of time for us. We answer by directing the sender to our contact form after saying hi and explaining why we do not use it as an official means.
Yeah, okay. I'm not sure if I 100% understand it. So brand messaging is a little bit different, right? Are you saying the right thing? Is this working? So basically, you've given them a message, social media to provide details or answers to questions. Okay, so you're giving them a message on DM and saying, please, and directing to the contact form that you don't use that channel for feedback, right? Like, and that's more of a customer service thing. What I'm really hearing about this for sure is fundamentally it's for confidentiality and privacy. And if you're telling them that, that's the most important thing. If you have figured out that that's something that you can't use, a channel that you can't use. You've given them a message to tell them why, and you've redirected them. That's fantastic. That's the most you can do. You have to do that. You have managed those expectations. You haven't forgot about that message. I love it. And then it went to a contact form. To me, that just totally makes sense. Is it working? Are you getting those? Carolina, feel free to jump in if I have totally misread that. But managing, and if you're trying to figure out if that messaging is working, if they're actually coming over to your contact form and you're not getting irate messages somewhere else on your channels that they can't communicate with you, then that's actually feedback. That's analyzing your marketing performance, right? So they're coming through and they're giving it there, and they haven't given you horrible Twitter messages that you're not responding because you're whatever that is. That's actually a good sign. So does that help? I hope that helps.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Next question. How much time apart should you do market research SWOT analysis for your business?
How much time apart? How much time does it? Oh, in between times that you actually do it, right? That's up to you, Jasmine. I just don't. I mean, how should you market research? So market research for sure is done right at the beginning. And then we're always a big fan of, this is a much broader picture, right? When you're doing your milestone reviews, every quarter, you want to sort of analyze stuff on some level, everything that you're doing. Biannually, maybe it's a bigger milestone and you want to review certain other things. Every year, I say, review your business plan, review things. Where are they going? At that point, you might want to touch base. It's kind of like your strategy session for the next year, and then do a quick SWOT, review what you did. Is it time to do it? Maybe at that point you analyze, going, things aren't working. I don't have enough information. We need to do something bigger. It really depends on your ability, what you need to get done. Like if all of a sudden at the end of the year and you say, we need to expand. We need to go across Canada. I'm so excited. This is really cool. Ontario seems to be working. But before you go and do that, it's like, we need to figure out if we can. Do we have the bandwidth to do this? Is the market out there? A big business decision like that will force you to do it. You should be doing it. And just as best practice, sort of maintenance mode, you might want to do it every year, even if you're not doing expansion. To do it quarterly, that's a lot. Doesn't mean you can't look at it quarterly and see if everything's off, but something quite broad that's going to take a lot of your time. You're going to have to want a reason to do it. If that helped.
Okay, so for the same research, is it more effective to use one method and increase the sample, or to use different kinds of methods considering that they are complementary?
Oh, that's a good question. So I have my thoughts on this. I mean, I'm sure I've been doing research. I'm not one of those accredited research people. There are people out there that research is their world, right? So definitely whatever I say, it's based on my experience as a marketing and comms person and through experience. So I'm sure there are best practices out there, and someone might come back with a different answer. From my experience, I'm a big fan of a mixed method approach. Interviews don't need to have a much, like, to interview 100 people is going to take so much time. When you start, what happens is you start to interview people and then you go, do I have enough information to see patterns? So start with a small set, 5 to 10, and you go, they're all saying the same thing. If I go interview 10 more people with the same audience, they're going to all say the same thing, right? Like at a certain point. So do a section, see if there's enough to start to see those patterns, and then maybe you broaden it. To me, to throw out a survey with very quantitative, because a mix of qualitative and quantitative is good. Quantitative, if that's really what you want, and it's much faster and you can do it, put out a survey. Like having that qualitative survey plus ongoing feedback. Now it's coming from different sources at different times. Now we can put them together and start to see those patterns. So I am a fan of a mixed method approach for that reason.
Is there any available market research available online for free to help us know about the sector or customer behaviors regarding a special sector?
Oh, there is a ton of stuff online, and that gets into secondary research. So you have to come back to that one. But if there is very much industry specific research that's done, there is local information that is available. You have to, start with a Google search, start with your industries, but that is all that that secondary research that there's some different avenues to get into that one as well, for sure.
Can you comment on the survey data analysis tools? Specifically, do market researchers today still use SPSS or Stata, or some open source data analysis tools such as RStudio and Python are on the rise?
There is a ton of survey tools and stuff out there, and I know I've only sort of touched on what's happening out there, and especially with the AI world, like it's blown up. So if you haven't looked recently, for sure, go and look at the different tools. The as far as like Ipsos and things, I think, no, it was SBS. I'm not familiar with some of those, but I know there's a bunch of them out there. So in my PR days, right, part of the research we would do, there's the standard research organizations, but there's tools. One of the ones that I actually put in there where you can go find your audiences, there's Personify is another one I didn't put in, where you can actually go and look about you've got to pay for these though, most of them. And then you can go, here's my industry, give me a bunch of information. There's even stats like Statista has a bunch of things on different industries. There's a ton out there. If you guys know, I mean, you're putting some in here. If anyone knows of some, please drop them in. But there's the primary versus secondary. So primary is the tools and stuff or audiences that I need to gather firsthand information. And then there's secondary, which is all the research that other people have done. And it's very good, right? Like it's interesting, but you got to figure out where it's coming from. That's where we'll talk about that in the secondary research to evaluate that secondary stuff that you find online or through resources. So definitely have a look in that. But so before you guys leave, I need you to test something. I found this. I'll drop it in. Emily did find it. There's a link in the chat and it's to a survey. And this survey, I found this, I think when I was doing the market research, I let you guys know about this. It's involve.me app.involve.me. I'll put the app down there, but you'll see it too. And you can do so many different kinds of surveys, quick things. You can even offer coupons and things. And I'll tell you how easy it is to do this. I did this and put this together at what is it? Was at 10? At 9:30 this morning. I found it, set up my account, figured out how to do it, and put this survey together in 20 minutes. So no, that's how user-friendly. I'm totally impressed at all their prompts, how easy it was. I didn't brand it. So, and there's even there's so many templates. It's really cool. So please do fill it out because I will be curious and I'll let you guys know how it goes too, because at the back end, actually, I could probably, if you guys have time, let me see. If you can fill them out, I'll show you what the results are and what the results page looks like. I just need you guys to actually fill them out. Right? The visual's cool. Absolutely. It's like crazy. So while you're filling that out, oh, good. Thank you for Des for responding to Carolina on that one. Appreciate that. Yeah, so there's a ton of tools. I'm just going to refresh this to see if you guys have done this for me. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. If you guys have 2 more minutes, I will show this to you. Okay, do you see my screen here?
Yep, you're good.
And this is what it looks like. This is what it looks like in behind. It's so super. So 12 visitors, partial submissions, 3 completed submissions. I think I did a bunch of tests this morning. I don't think it showed up. Maybe 1 test showed up. Different industries. So I was able to change this. Originally, they had the template show up and it said age groups. So I thought, I don't need to know your age. Like that for me was, and it's like instantly quick, add in new questions. It was cool. How do you like grow? All of this was customizable, but they gave you prompts, right? Like the stars and the happy faces and things. And I just changed over top. How likely are you recommend grow? I put in subscribe to our newsletter. So originally they had this set up. So if you, where can I send my discount code? So if you are trying to do an incentive, and you can embed this on your website, and you're trying to do an incentive, and it's like, hey, first product, you know how you put, percentage sign up for your email? Well, sometimes they're not quite ready for it. So maybe you take them through a journey before you do that. Keeps them on your website. Maybe you give some more information. It's just another option, but it will allow you to put in a coupon code, but you have to integrate it with Shopify. I couldn't figure out how to do all of that, but there is an integration option there, which is a way to get people to subscribe. It's like, I'm going to give you a discount code, but also subscribe to my newsletter. Right. And then there you go. So that is one of the things that these guys will let you do. And then if I go back to creepy.
Laura, is it free?
Yes. Yeah, I haven't been to pay for this. However, they're very well, I'm always impressed when people figure out how to scale their product. So the one I did, you were editing. Oh, I can't edit a live session. Okay. What I did was free. So what it wouldn't allow me to do, it had the stage things, is there's a few features. Actually, let me show you, because I think here. See, I thought about this because I always look for pricing. So their freemium lets you do 100 submissions, partial submissions. Still embed and do it on pop-ups, basic features, and you can even test the paid features. Yeah, okay, so you can go into a trial and it lets you embed it. It's just there were some limitations around some of the settings and information in the background and how much I could actually edit it, which totally makes sense, right? If you're going to even now, I think this is US, but $20 a month, substantially more submissions, which is usually the way it goes, and more customizations, plus some permission aspects in the back end. And then the professional, obviously you're scaling up, and you can start to get customization. I think this one lets me take off all the branding too. That was a big thing. And quite often it's like MailChimp, right? Where you see the MailChimp branding. So now you can actually white label it with your own brand. So yeah, so for $20 a month, you get the bigger version. Yeah, there you go. So there's the tool tip of the day. So thanks everyone for participating. I appreciate it.